right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I now call to order this regular board meeting on November 14th at 5:02 p.m. Trustee Erickson, do we have a quorum?
We do.
Okay, do we have public comments?
We do. We have 4 public comments.
Okay, please call them forward.
Sure. We'll start with Beth Cypress and then move to Kimberly Atkinson.
Okay. Hi. Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Gonzalez. My name is Beth Cypress, and I'm the LMT at Villa Park Elementary. I'm here tonight to ask the board's assistance in urging the district to update the CSEA contract language with regards to reclassification swiftly and fairly. Last negotiation cycle, CSEA and the district went back and forth on this topic with no resolution. It's my understanding that reclassification contract language and processes are being negotiated again in the current contract cycle. Classified employees need clear language and processes in place for reclassification. There are many positions within OUSD that are desperate need of reclassification as the job duties have dramatically changed over the years. Library media technicians, for example, have been trying to be reclassified for over 7 years. In 2017, a small committee of LMTs met with Mr. Gonzalez, who was at the time, I believe, the Executive Director of Human Resources, Kathleen Corella, and other leadership personnel to discuss changes in our position, update our job description, and make our case for reclassification. After a couple of meetings, the only thing that came of that was an updated job description that included a few of the newer duties, but ignored reclassification altogether. The last time LMTs were reclassified was in 2001, to my understanding, when the position changed from just library management to library and textbook management. The position title changed from LMT1 to LMT2 and was reclassified with just the addition of textbooks to the job duties. Since then, many additional duties have been added to the elementary LMT's position. We still have library and textbook management, but have added resource management, which includes musical instruments for the VAPA program, management of the district's extensive one-to-one technology device program, which requires LMTs to act as the tech support for those devices on days that we do not have tech support from the district, which at my school is 3 days per week. In addition to these extensive and time-consuming duties, the textbook management has become a much bigger part of the job. Textbook management used to consist of 4 textbooks per student and 1 consumable workbook. Currently, each student can have as many as 5 to 10 textbooks and 8 to 10 consumable workbooks for the LMT to manage, depending on the grade and proficiency level of the student. Since we don't have clear reclassification processes in our contract, we go back and forth between the district and CSEA, being told at each turn something different about the steps to reclassify, depending on who we are talking to or meeting with at the time. Please urge the district to add clear and fair contract language regarding reclassification, and then do the right thing and reclassify the positions that have dramatically changed within OUSD over the years. Staff are feeling overwhelmed and underappreciated. Thank you for your time.
Next is Kimberly Atkinson, and followed by Peter Ritchie.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Atkinson. I'm the library media technician at Serrano Elementary in Villa Park. In 2005, I started my career with OUSD as an instructional aide at Prospect Elementary and eventually became the LMT there. The job was 7 hours a day and the enrollment was around 400. In the spring of 2009, Jamie Brown, the director of HR at the time, announced at a meeting that we would all have our hours reduced by 1. At that time, the LMTs were either 7 or 8 hours based on school size. He said this was due to the recession and necessary to save money for the district. He told us this was a temporary cut and our hours would be restored as soon as the district improved financially. If we did not agree to take the cut, we would be laid off, and we were given a document to sign And we all signed that document. As a result, I became a 6-hour LMT. In 2012, I was placed at Serrano, a school with 620 students. I was surprised that I would be doing the same job with the same amount of hours, but now I would have about 30% more students. This is definitely a volume-based job. Therefore, the more students you have at a site, the more textbooks, workbooks, devices, and library books you'll manage, and the more classes you'll see each week. The cuts back in 2009 and constant changes in enrollment have also created an inequity of hours among our group. This has been going on for many years, and HR has refused to address this or make any adjustments to fix it. Some of us work at big schools but have less hours than those who work at small schools with more hours. And here are just 3 examples. Levita has 456 students. The librarian is 8 hours. At West Orange with 353 enrollment, that librarian works 7 hours. And I'm at Serrano with 543 students, but I'm only 6 hours. A formula for the LMTs of hours based on enrollment is what's supposed to be in place, but it's not adhered to. This inequity has never been acknowledged, explained, or justified by HR, but they're fully aware of it and continue to look the other way. There's also confusion as to whether or not a memorandum of understanding is something that a principal or supervisor can write to justify why an employee needs more hours. I've had principals willing to write an MOU for me, but now HR says it's something they will no longer consider. It's unacceptable that we were promised a restoration of hours so long ago, and now 15 years later, here we sit with an outdated, inaccurate job description, more to do, and not enough time to do everything. If given more hours, we'd be able to enhance our libraries, which would directly benefit the students. Many times I've asked for help from my principal, who says to go to HR. HR says to go to the union. The union says to go talk to the state labor rep, and everybody just passes the buck, and we continue to be neglected. The only solution is to give us all the same number of hours, just like office managers, who are all 8 hours, regardless of school size. Coming to you, the board, is our last resort. Please help us. We're vital to our school sites. I'm sorry, I had a little bit more.
Next is Peter Ritchie.
Alrighty. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Peter Ritchie. I am the library media technician at Fletcher Academy, and I am speaking today to ask members of the board to consider reclassifying the LMT2 position. This is my 10th year in this position and my 18th year in OUSD. When I assumed my role at Fletcher, the demands of the position were very different. I managed the library inventory and the textbook inventory. In the years that followed, a new inventory for musical instruments was added, and the push for one-to-one devices further increased demand of my time and efforts. My school only had 17 classes in 2014, and now the library services 22 classes every week. This is all without an increase in hours. As a 6-hour LMT, I am scheduled to leave before our upper grade students are dismissed from school. Over the years, I have gained expertise and have acted as a resource for all the LMTs. Myself and others have acted as trainers and mentors to newly hired LMTs. By my count, I have had a hand in training 8.5 people in this role, but the job has grown far more difficult to perform. The amount of materials per student has increased, the addition of one-to-one devices is a terrible drain on my time, and I have found that I have needed to sacrifice good practices and have exhausted myself to accomplish all that I can for my staff and students. I have seen the library media technician position change. I have noticed that we are seeing more turnover, and I have spoken to coworkers, parents, and aspiring LMTs who all note that we are performing tasks that are outside of our job description. I have a deep love of my work helping students discover a love of reading, assisting with book recommendations, and inspiring creativity. I feel that the spirit of the current job description is being exploited. The strain on our time tracking instruments was not a part of the original duties. The individual tracking of iPads and laptops for one-to-one student use was never a part of our original duties. I fear that our schools will lose more talented and dedicated professionals if changes are not made to reflect the whole of what an LMT is asked to do. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter.
And last speaker is Beth Albright.
I prepared a chart for you to each have so that you can reference that while I'm speaking. that they're passing out right now. Hi, my name is Beth Albright, and I'm here to talk about employees' costs for medical insurance. I'm a classified employee and have been employed for Orange Unified for over 20 years. We all know that the cost of insurance has increased, as well as medical insurance. But before I go over the printout that I've given to each of you, I want to say that most of the additional costs for medical insurance is being passed on to us employees. Orange Unified is not increasing their contributions enough, and some years not at all. At the top of my chart, I show my costs for Kaiser for myself plus one dependent. It includes years 2019 to the current, and the increase in costs and the percentage of the cost of each year. This also shows how much Orange Unified paid. These are my costs for my increase for my Kaiser. In 2019, I paid $14. In 2020, I paid $56. That's an increase of 333%. In 2021, I paid $114. That's an increase of 103%. In 2022, I paid $2,004. That's an increase of 79%. In 2004, I again paid $204 because Orange Unified agreed to increase their contribution while they were doing a discovery on a new insurance company instead of having CalPERS. In 2024, my insurance went up to $422, 107%. 2025, and 2024, we changed to CISC, so it was supposed to be better. 2025, I'm paying $529 per month, 25% increase. How can the employees afford this? We're hourly employees. I've been employed for Orange Unified for over 20 years. I don't even make $30 an hour. The next part refers to the Orange Unified School Board meeting dated August 17th, 2023, which I encourage everyone to watch on the OUSD YouTube, which streams archived board meetings. Watch starting at 3 hours and 13 minutes to 3 hours and 30 minutes. It's very informative and shows this information that I include here. Mr. David Rivera, the Deputy Superintendent for Orange Unified, shares this information about the cost of CalPERS versus CISC, which CISC Can I continue or no? Okay, so the bargaining agreement needs to include a higher contribution from Orange Unified for our medical. We can't afford these costs. So according to Mr. Rivera, the employees and the district are going to save $5.2 million per year. That is what the board meeting, his statement was. He also stated that over 60% of the employee families have Kaiser. And all the risk management could tell me was, well, because you have Kaiser and Kaiser's costs have gone up so much, 60% of the families that work for Orange Unified have Kaiser.
Okay, thank you.
Please feel free to contact me. My email's on there.
Okay, we adjourned to closed session at 5:16. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. I call to order the regular session, November 14th at 7:08. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, moving on to report of closed session. We do have a public employee appointment announcement. The Board of Education is pleased to announce the following appointment of Michael Christensen to the position of interim superintendent effective Monday, November 18th, 2024. The vote was 7-0. And now on to the adoption of the agenda. Before we move the agenda, out of respect of the tragic events that happened at Villa Park High School earlier today, and in keeping with past practices, we're going to forego all celebratory reports and recognitions contained in item 4 of the agenda tonight. We will keep the superintendent's report and move the president's report to the end of the meeting. And we will be conducting only necessary business. We will be scheduling a second December board meeting at a later date to accommodate the additional district business. And after business is concluded, Trustees Ortega and Rumsey will be recognized for their service to OUSD, as this is their last meeting. So please remain to give them your regards and share in refreshments as they have been provided this evening. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any additional discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. We move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Good evening, Orange Unified Community. Earlier today, an accident took place in a construction zone at Villa Park High School. While no students or staff were involved or injured, we are deeply saddened to share that we have been notified by authorities that one adult male working at the Villa Park High School gym renovation project was transported to a local trauma center, and another was pronounced deceased. Our thoughts and condolences are with those who are affected by this heartbreaking accident. As always, counselors are available on campus for any students or staff members who may need their services. We thank our partners at Orange County Fire Authority and Orange County Sheriff's Department for their quick response and support during this tragic incident. At this time, I would like to request that we take a moment of silence to honor the men involved, their families, and loved ones. Thank you, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We move on to item 5A, approval of the minutes, October 17th, 2024. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Trustee Glass. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. Item 6, public comment.
Persons wishing to speak should submit a public comment card prior to the meeting. In general, individual speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda and non-agenda item. The board shall limit the total time for public input on each item to 30 minutes. A speaker shall not yield to another person any portion of the time allotted to him or her to speak. The total time for agenda items and non-agenda items at a regular meeting shall be 30 minutes, and the time allowed for those who make requests to speak will be as follows. In this situation, we have 4 speakers, so each will be allowed 3 minutes to speak, and all 4 are on item 7A.
Okay, please call them forward.
Okay. Scott Resnick.
Good evening, Board and President Page. My name is Scott Resnick, and I'm a parent of a first grader in OUSD and a taxpayer in the district. I've been up here several times over the last few years to call out areas in which the district faces significant financial exposure. As a parent in the district, I don't want funds diverted from the classroom to pay unnecessary expenses, fees, or fines. As a taxpayer, I don't want any unnecessary expenditures that are pure fiscal waste. And as a lawyer, I don't want to see this district waste needless money while front-paging a local newspaper for an issue that the district could have gotten ahead of. Rescinding Board Policy 5020.2 is a prime example of getting ahead of potential litigation. The state of California has already sued 2 nearby school districts for their implementation of similar policies, and there's no reason the state can't make a similar example of us. By rescinding BP 5020.2, OUSD is shielding itself from liability for having a potentially illegal policy on its books. There are also several lawsuits opposing AB 1955. Without a crystal ball, we have no way of knowing how any courts will rule, and if they rule against the state, we have no idea what framework will be set up. BP 5020.2 may even run counter to any state or federal version of it, which again would expose OUSD to litigation. Whether or not you support the idea of Board Policy 5020.2 is not the issue tonight. The issue tonight is exposure to litigation, fines, and fiscal waste. The board should rescind Board Policy 5020.2 and wait for further guidance from the state of California or the Department of Education.
Our next speaker is Brenda Lebsack.
As the board is probably going to vote to repeal the parent notification tonight, as a former board member from 2016 to 2020, I'm asking the board to simply inform your constituents about important facts. Please tell them that the California Teachers Association passed a business item in 2020 saying that students should have access to puberty blockers and hormone therapy without parent knowledge or consent, regardless the age of the child or if the child in special education with an IEP. This is not law yet, but as a state delegate of the CTA, I assure you it's coming. Tell them OUSD partners with Chalk Hospital and that Chalk has a gender clinic and provides puberty blockers for kids as young as 9 years old. When I was a board member, Chalk was on the agenda in 2019 in order to provide free mental health services to students. I found it odd that this service would be free. This is when I learned Chalk had a gender clinic, and I asked questions via email to the head endocrinologist, Dr. Mark Daniels. Recently, OUSD received a public records request for those emails between me and Chalk's gender clinic staff. I emailed the document to you, but did not hear back. I'm providing a hard copy tonight of the email so you can respectfully inform your constituents. They also deserve to be told the definition of non-binary, which is on their student data forms and on special education information system. The definition of non-binary is unlimited gender choices. This was confirmed by the California School Board Association Chief Information Officer Troy Flint, who defined it as multiple options. The Orange County Healthcare Agency defines it as the intentional creation of one's own gender identity. As an OUSD trustee in 2019, I had parents from El Medina High School call me who had a son with autism and significant cognitive impairments. They were shocked to find out that their son socially transitioned his gender at school with help from a school counselor. Mind you, these parents were very involved in the PTA and in their students' IEPs, yet they were totally blindsided. The IEP procedural safeguards say their special needs child cannot attain Their special needs child cannot attain related services such as counseling without their consent. However, this was not true. This family has been very devastated over this situation. When will OUSD explicitly inform parents that students on IEPs can also be socially transitioned behind parents' backs regardless of age? Ed Code 51101 says that parents and guardians of pupils enrolled in public schools have the right to be informed. Equitable access to information is respect. Withholding information such as change laws, policies, and definitions, especially to students on IEPs, is not respect. Thank you.
Next up is David Scott.
Good evening, board members, staff, community. It's good to be here. You know, I'm on the family advisory at Chalk, actually. And while they do have gender affirming care, it's absolutely without parental consent. It has to be with parental consent. You cannot do it otherwise. So I don't know exactly what she's referring to there, and it was some sort of a secret agenda. Okay. But as a Christian, I'll just say this, that Romans 13 verses 1 and 2 says, obey the government, for God is the one who has put them there. There's no government anywhere that God has not placed in power. So no matter what you believe about public schools or your faith, I would say that public schools are not the place to have this conversation, not the time or the place for these conversations. I feel compelled to remind people in our community that we're to do unto others as we would have done unto us. Nobody wants their beliefs to have been forced upon them. Whether you're a Christian or of any other faith, whether you think you have some sort of spiritual, moral obligation, I would again argue that this is neither the time or place for that. This is a school. The schools and our children that we're talking about, the purpose is for their education, plain and simple. As a parent here with 3 children, I've never felt that there is a secret agenda to force any other types of beliefs on them, and I wouldn't want that anyways. And I don't want it to run opposite of that, where people are being forced into the opposing side of these beliefs. So whether you're a Christian or a person of any faith, I think that we need to foster an environment of respect and compassion for one another, no matter what.
Our last speaker on this issue is Jolyn Lang.
Hello, Board, Superintendent Gonzalez. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I am glad that you guys are addressing this, bringing our school board in compliance with the state law, and I believe even more importantly, looking out for our students. Studies have shown that LGBTQ youth are much higher risk of suicide, and one of the things that can be done to prevent that is having a safe school environment. Whether that means giving them counseling while they're preparing to tell their parents at a time when it's ready and safe for them, or just having a teacher that uses their preferred pronouns, it helps save lives. And so thank you for following the law and helping protect OUSD students.
There are no more public comments
Okay, thank
on
you.
that issue. Sorry.
So as the board is aware, Governor Newsom did sign into law 1955, which prohibits and invalidates this board policy, and as such, the rescission is consistent with state law, so I'll make a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Pelley. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh. Did we already?
What's that?
Okay.
I just wanted to make some comments. Obviously, this was something that we had brought forward. And so looking at it and looking in the context of it all, if you looked at the policy as it stands now, it falls in line with what state law is all about. There's really no variance to it. And so going back to look at it in that context is following what the law says already. So I just want to make sure it's clear, there's clarity out there and there's understanding to it. again, the vote's going to go and do what it wants, but parental advisement is always necessary for all students, no matter what the subject happens to be. And too often we get away from parental consent. And we see that across the spectrum. I've seen that for many years, and it doesn't even have to be associated with this policy. It's been across the spectrum. And so, as most of you know, by bringing that up, I've been on this board long enough to experience that and to have received many conversations or many outreaches and communications with individuals about that and having challenges in that arena and to help parents so there's understanding brought forward. So all you can shake your head all day, every day, but the reality is the reality. When these parents feel what they feel, they're the parents of that student. Excuse me. So, again, it's about showing respect to the parents, is the bottom line. And if the parents want to be informed, they want to be informed. They have that right as a parent. They are the ones who shelter, take care of, do everything they possibly can to keep their kids safe and to go to every ends of the world to protect their kids, as I would do, and I hope that you would too. It's about protecting the family, protecting these kids. And it's just, it saddens me that there's been such an attack on kids. So I had to say my piece about this and bring understanding to it. So I will be voting no against it. So that's all I have.
I'll make a comment,
Go
a
ahead.
very brief comment. I will also be voting no because I believe that the policy is in line with the United States Constitution, which is what we pledged that we would protect. And it was not a religious issue for me. It was a matter of the Constitution and the rights that the Constitution gives parents. And so that's why I'll be voting no tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any additional comments? Well, as a parent, I haven't been limited, and I've been able to have open and honest conversations about my children's gender identity or just being able to have access to their student records and different things like that. So I think that's just where we agree to disagree and call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, motion carries 5-2. Seven B, proposed revisions to board policies, second reading and approval.
Yes, these proposed revisions are brought to the board for second reading and approval, and it's recommended that the Board of Education approve the revised board policies.
Okay. Seeing the policies listed ahead, are there any additional revisions or questions or comments?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. There were some additions that I wanted to discuss. We can pull up Board Policy 3312.
Then I'll withdraw my motion at this moment in time
Sorry.
as to 3312. Yeah. I'll just withdraw my motion at this point in time, and then we can pull whatever ones we want.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Let's do.
All right. 3312, page 2. I already spoke to Mr. Gonzalez about this, that there needs to be a timeline set in place of how often there's going to be revisions or evaluations. So on the red text, we'll need to add some verbiage with that. Anyone have an issue? Okay.
Just for clarification on that, trustee Page, is that revisions in regards to a certain section of it, or just because these revisions are based on recommendations that are coming to us from CSBA to update? So just a little more clarification on that, please.
Yeah, on that first one, the number 1.
Okay.
So number 1 in red on Board Policy 3312B states procedures that produce accurate and reliable financial statements and at the same time safeguard the assets, financial resources, and integrity of every employee responsible for handling money and property. Control systems shall be systematically evaluated and revised to keep pace with changing responsibility of management. So I think you're talking about adding some timelines. So is that in regards to when they will be systematically evaluated and revised?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have a timeline
I'm
suggestion?
open to discussion on that. What would be feasible?
Well, currently, right now, we do have a lot of different ways of evaluating, and that's through our audit process as well. That takes place, and that takes place annually. So there is already those systems in place. Again, these are, the language here is based on the recommendations that CSBA, but we do have that already in place through an annual audit.
Okay, since that's common practice, can we just add that language in there?
So I think the suggestion is to add control systems shall be systematically evaluated and revised to keep pace with changing responsibilities of management on an annual basis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any others? Go ahead, Trustee Glass.
Just, I wanted to I spoke with Superintendent Gonzalez regarding the emergencies and disaster preparedness plan, and I just wanted to be clear about the fact that I do need to look at the AR in order to better inform myself on what the actual steps would be. But I think it's also important for us to consider a committee so that we can address some of the matters with regards to disaster and emergencies. Most recently with all due respect to today, but most recently with respect to what happened at El Medina High School and the power outage. We want to be able to inform parents about certain issues of egress and whatnot for their students, and safety matters for the classified folks as well as the teachers in those environments. So understanding that we can go ahead and approve this, I'd like to be able to address this within the context of an ad hoc committee meeting to put more meat on the bones of this because emergencies and disasters are, unforeseen. So we want to be able to have something in place for all of our administrators and teachers to be able to act. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Glass. And what I think what we'll do is I'll ask Mr. Angel to put something in a Friday letter that discusses policy, if there's administrative regulation that's in context here, and then also the district emergency plan, and then site plans and where types of information falls within each, so that way we can figure out where the best place to address those questions that you have, whether if it's at the policy level, the administrative regulation, which is approved by administration, or at the site level, which might involve maybe some templates that are given to the school site as they're developing their plans from the Office of Student and Community Services.
And thank you for that, but also some training with regards to that wholesale across the board.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have
Just
that
to
somewhere
address that
written?
as As well, I
Already?
think that we
Sorry.
probably do want to talk about having some subcommittees after the first of the year. I think that that's something that this board will probably be interested in forming with regard to some of those special issues that we all have an interest in.
So ad hoc committees where the board participates?
Ad hoc or subcommittees, whatever it is that we decide we need to do with that, with whatever specific issue. So we all need to kind of start thinking about that.
Okay.
I just have one
Go ahead.
note. I don't really have a change here, but I did want to highlight Board Policy 3550 on nutrition services, because I'm really happy with this change, because this is something that parents have brought up in the past. And basically, it reads that the district's food service program shall give priority to serving freshly prepared on-site meals using whole or minimally processed sustainable foods, which are locally grown or produced, including fresh fruits and vegetables, and providing plant-based or restricted diet options for students. And the other thing they also talk about, and I won't read, but to establish school gardens and farm-to-school projects to increase awareness. So I'm very pleased with this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, knowing that we had additional revisions and comments, is there a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Trustee Glass. Is there a second?
I'll still second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Okay. Motion carries 7-0. 7C, Resolution 122425, authorizing formation of a 7-Eleven committee and second reading and approval of proposed 7-Eleven committee bylaws.
Thank you. And good evening, Board President Page, trustees and community members here and virtually. Over the last few board meetings, we have been working on components of the SMART plan and providing you updates on the progress as well as information to take the next steps. Tonight, we will be asking the board to approve the resolution to move forward with the formation of a 7-Eleven advisory committee to advise on potential surplus land for a portion of La Vida. With this approval, staff will then move forward with the application process, bring forward names of interested applicants for approval who meet the criteria, and establish meeting dates to then present recommendations to the board based on the committee's study of the property. The committee, as shared before, is advisory, and this process and approval does not commit the board to any action with the property and instead provides more information for options. Before we move forward with the approval of the resolution and bylaws, I have asked council to provide a brief general overview of the options the board has based on the district property overall, of all district properties overall, and additionally, the options that may be part of the recommendations the committee presents to the board through their work. I will now turn it over to Serene Abrahami.
Thank you, Ms. Holgren, for that introduction, and thank you, board members and community, for having me here tonight. As stated in the introduction, I'm providing asset management options and opportunities, an overview of what districts can do with their real property. So, of course, as you know, the greatest asset that school districts have for the most part are the land that they own. School districts own acres upon acres of both school district K-12 property as well as administrative facilities that they utilize and are oftentimes the greatest landowners in the cities and the counties that they serve. For purposes of tonight and the asset management activity that Ms. Holgren described that the 7-Eleven committee would be engaged in, what is an asset management plan and what is the definition of that within the school district context. So what we want to be considering when developing what are opportunities and options for school district property. We not only want to consider, of course, the asset themselves, the property, and what can be done with that and the value of those sites, but also very much prioritizing the school functions, so programming, recreational opportunities on those sites, what are the needs of the students and of the community, while simultaneously considering options and opportunities for potentially developing the sites for ongoing revenue streams. As part of that process, and what we often say is school districts, again, because their property is some of their most valuable asset, is selling district property is not always the best option. Districts want to consider taking all necessary steps to retain ownership of that property. And again, as part of the asset management planning, thinking about what best serves the community, the students, and the district as a whole. So as you'll see, the presentation is broken into 3 segments. The first part of it is what we call the surplus property disposition process. So we'll walk through that, and as you see, here's the cover slide for that. The second part is what we call the alternatives to surplusing, which again, we'll walk through a number of short-term and long-term leasing options that the district can potentially consider. And then lastly, we'll talk about where if, for example, the district sells long-terms or short-term leases, what can be done with the revenue from that potential opportunity. So surplus property disposition process, and tying it into what is before the board tonight for consideration, which is the formation of a 7-Eleven committee. When we talk about surplus property, there are various steps and aspects that have to be considered. This is the general overview. A 7-Eleven committee, so a committee formed of between 7 and 11 members, which is why it's called a 7-Eleven committee, is formed, and that is a Brown Act committee, so everything that committee does is done in public, just like when the board meetings occur and you all receive public comment. The meetings would be conducted in a similar fashion, and the purpose of the committee is to receive input from the community, but also to consider and be educated, similar to what is being presented tonight, on the options and opportunities for what a school district can do with their property. In this case, of course, the 7-Eleven committee is being formed to consider one school site and a portion of that site. And then as time goes on, and if the board so deems, additional properties can be brought to the 7-Eleven committee for consideration. And again, for this asset management planning and long-term view of what can potentially be considered as options for the site. Another aspect of the surplus property disposition process, which you'll see, is the public offering and public bidding procedures, which we'll cover in some further slides. And I do want to highlight here and make a note. It used to be that if a property was deemed surplus, and we'll explain what that means, that charter schools received what's called a right of first refusal. So they were the first entity that would receive notice and receive an opportunity to purchase the property or long-term lease, depending on what the opportunity was. That has sunsetted. So that occurred in 2016, the sunsetting of that statute. So now there are public entities that receive a right of first refusal or first notice, but charter schools are not on that list. Ooh. Sorry about that.
Just hit the black button again.
Is it me?
No, it's here. It's right next to the clip. You're good.
Sorry about that. Okay. So surplus property disposition process. We talked just generally about a 7-Eleven committee. The 7-Eleven committee's role is to make recommendations to the board, again, about, in this case, a portion of a certain property. And if the recommendation to the board is to deem the property surplus, which is either to sell or long-term lease for up to 99 years, and the board makes a finding and deems the property surplus, The next step in the process would be what we call the public offering process. So I touched on that a second ago. So as part of that, public agencies and state entities, as you see some examples listed there, the UC Regents, Cal States, public housing authorities, get what's called a right of first refusal. So they get a notice that the property is available for either sale or long-term lease, depending on what the recommendation is from the 7-Eleven committee and what the notice says. There are, of course, this is an extremely transparent process. Newspaper publication has to be given, as you see there, for 3 successive weeks of the resolution and the opportunity. And direct mailed notice also goes out to the public agencies. Notice also goes out to planning agencies. If the property that's being considered for surplus and has been deemed surplus has a recreational component to it, then what we call the Naylor Act has to be followed. And under the Naylor Act, recreational agencies also get a right of first refusal, along with some of these other agencies that are listed closer to the top of the slide. And you see there's either 40 or 60 days for the agencies to respond. So if the sale to a public agency does not occur for whatever reason, either because no public agencies expressed interest, a negotiation occurred, and a sale or long-term lease process could not be consummated, then the property can be put for formal bidding procedures. So formal bidding entails what you see there in some detail, where the district would adopt the board would adopt a resolution of intent to formally to engage in a formal bidding process. Actually, during a board meeting, the board would receive written bids and can also receive oral bids, and then the terms and conditions of the sale or lease must be identified in the initial resolution of intention. And then the board can select the highest bid, and does not have to select the highest bid, but it is an opportunity for a formal bidding procedure for that property. Next slide.
Are you taking questions now, or should we wait till the end?
I can take questions as we're going along.
I have a question about the, is there a particular order that needs to be accounted for, or is it everybody just puts in their bid and whoever is the highest? Like, do we have any obligation to go to say a school first, or?
Because there is the public offering process, that's almost part 2 of this surplusing process. So I think as we laid out, the board would approve a resolution deeming the property surplus. Public agencies get the right of first refusal, and then there's a formal bidding procedure. During the formal bidding process in open session, no, there isn't within that context a right, again, a right of first refusal to public agencies, if that's the question.
Okay, and then so if a public agency is interested in the property and they want to use it, do they have is it restricted to what they can use it for? Or say if the city wanted to purchase something and then they wanted to find a private buyer, is that something they can do?
It's difficult to place restrictions like that on a buyer, but I think when it's another public agency, that discussion can happen pretty openly and transparently. There are certain ways that the district can navigate that, like for example, within the deed itself, transferring the property if it's a sale, certain conditions can be listed for the potential use of the property, and there are different options for navigating that. So if the district wanted to explore ways to maybe condition what the use would be after it's sold, that's something that can be discussed, yes.
Okay. Because my concern is, okay, say someone makes an offer on it and it's below market, like normally what you would get if you put it out for private sale, and then they buy it at a lower price thinking it's going to go to serve the public, and then they sell it to a private for higher, and then they are making the difference. So otherwise, we could have just sold it ourselves privately to a private buyer. Do you get my point?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Hopefully I answered it.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question too. I'm assuming other like cities, municipalities have similar rules, right? They still have to make public offerings and things like that. Is that right? So in terms of they can't just turn around and sell it to a private buyer, they would still have some of the same rules we would have as a public agency.
They would. Typically, cities and counties have to adhere to what we call the Surplus Land Act. K-12s, like yourself, have their own surplus statutes that they follow, which work hand in hand with the Surplus Land Act, but cities and counties follow the Surplus Land Act. Actually, their ordering is a little bit different as to the public offering process, but yes, generally they do have to go through a similar procedure.
Okay. Also, I have questions. If you could explain a little bit more about the Naylor Act and exactly what that means. Is that specific to a municipality or, and do they have to purchase it for that purpose?
So if the school district's property that's under the 7-Eleven committee's review and is then recommended for surplus and surplus, was used for recreational purposes for the immediate 8 years prior to when it was surplused, and there is no other public agency or public facility within the vicinity that can make up the difference for the recreational area that's being lost if this property is sold for non-recreational purposes, then it meets the conditions of the Naylor Act. And under the Naylor Act, when it's offered to recreational agencies under the right of first refusal requirement, they can purchase it for less than fair market value. But that's actually a really good segue into this next slide. So if I can.
Sure, because I had a question then, is that if it's, so like these fields that we have out here, they're used for baseball, soccer, or whatever. Is that what you're talking about? That if we have a playground, let's say we have a field on a school, but it's not being used by the public, it's just basically spare land that we have, does that have to go to a city or recreational use first? Is there a right of first refusal, even if it's not being used by the public?
Yes, if it meets those three criteria that I just mentioned, that it's recreational facilities, that's been used that way for the prior 8 years, and also that there's no public property within the vicinity that can make up for the space that's being lost.
So used by who for the prior 8 years? That's my question.
Used by the school district.
By the school, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that, why I said that was a good segue into the next slide is because there is an opportunity for school districts to seek waivers of the surplus procedures we just covered. The public offering and public bidding procedures, the district can make an application to the State Board of Education, ask for either both to be waived or just the formal bidding procedures to be waived, depending on what the circumstances are. And more these days, we are seeing that school districts are asking for that flexibility from the state, because you'll see in the second bullet that what that allows is that not that somehow there isn't going to be transparency around the sale or long-term lease. What it allows the district to do is then either put it on the open market through an RFP process, or if the district so chooses to potentially use a brokerage firm to do that. There are options, just like if a private individual was looking to potentially sell or long-term lease their property, it would give the district options to do that through a more open market process, as opposed to the more strict formal bidding procedures that we covered earlier. So moving on to part 2 of the presentation, which is alternatives to surplus. And this is primarily how districts would procure short-term or long-term leases under the Education Code and Government Code sections that we're going to cover. For shorter-term leases, under the joint use statutes, what we have identified there as Education Code section 17527 et sec, the district can lease on a short-term basis to what you see there listed as including nonprofit institutions, private agencies, businesses, under certain conditions. There is a 5-year term limit for this type of procurement of leases. There is an exception to that if the property is being leased to for park and recreational purposes by public entity or nonprofit corporation. A unique feature of this particular set of statutes is that the district must lease for fair market value. So there's a fair market rent component that is negotiated as part of this process. There is an exception for public entities. So for public entities, that can be negotiated down. And of course, there would be a process for that. Again, on the transparency front, the school board would have to approve a short-term lease under the joint use statutes and make the 3 findings that you see listed there at the bottom of the slide. So the school board would have to find, and of course would have to be given sufficient information to be able to find, that the use does not interfere with educational programs or activities of any school or class, does not unduly disrupt the residents of the neighborhood, and does not jeopardize the safety of children in the school. Are there any questions on this particular slide before I move to the next one? We did cover that the district can procure long-term leases for up to 99 years after a property is deemed surplus. There are alternatives to that, where the district can again procure a long-term lease for up to 99 years, and that's under the joint occupancy statutes, Education Code 17515 et sec. This is the equivalent of being able to do a public-private partnership with school district property. And again, there's a very transparent process that is engaged in order to procure a long-term lease of this type. As an initial step, the board would have to approve what's called a resolution of intention, where the board puts the community, the world, on notice that it's going to seek proposals for the development of district property, and also express in that resolution that what the procedure would be for that, which is at a subsequent board meeting, proposals would be received and considered by the board, and the board has the option then of selecting the proposal that, quote unquote, best meets the needs of the district. What is unique about this particular procurement method is that it does require that the district maintain a presence on the site, and what that means is that the district can require, as part of the overall project, that a development include a community good aspect. So that can be the equivalent we've seen of child development centers, for example, refurbishment of property or buildings that are on the site. So if, for example, the district needed updated adult ed classrooms or meeting rooms, or in some cases, additional recreational facilities, those can all be part and parcel of the proposal that's put out, and the developer would have to respond with how they will satisfy the requirements and the needs of the district. Okay. If there are no questions on this slide, I will move to the next one. Another public-private partnership series of statutes and procurement opportunity is under Government Code Section 5956 et sec. And you see here that the district may solicit proposals and enter into agreements with private entities for design, construction, or reconstruction of certain types of fee-producing infrastructure. So this typically would relate to if, for example, the district has cell tower leases, or in some cases, what we're seeing in order to generate long-term revenue streams, districts are considering billboards that face the highways, so not facing the school side and typically on administrative facilities and not on school sites. But that is something, just as an alternative outside the box opportunity, that districts are considering. And the reason why this particular set of statutes are used to procure those leases is because it gives you a maximum term of up to 35 years, which, as you can imagine, if you're, for example, building a billboard, As a billboard company, you'd want to have a longer lease term in order to get the benefit of the improvement that you're building and to be able to be on that site for some time. And then, of course, the district gets the benefit of a long-term revenue generation opportunity. An important aspect of this, and again, speaking to the transparency of it, it does have some stringent auditing provisions that the district can require of the lessee. What we're seeing more and more from 7-Eleven committees as recommendations is also, district, please explore the opportunity to work with your sister public agencies, so counties and cities, to find ways to maybe do a joint development. So under the Community Recreation Act, there is an opportunity to do that, and so we wanted to include it. It authorizes and empowers cities and public school districts to cooperate to build joint recreational facilities. So it is a really good set of statutes to consider, and when 7-Eleven committees make that type of recommendation, we want to be able to give them the option of how can that actually be developed and delivered pursuant to their recommendation.
A question about that.
Sure.
For community recreation, would say a pool qualify for that under that area?
Yes.
Okay.
We've
what if-
even had performing arts centers.
that was going
Yes.
to be my next one, or performing arts center. Okay, thanks.
Yes. It's a somewhat broad definition of recreational under the statute, so it's helpful. And just touching on the last alternative to the surplus property procedures are the exchange procedures. So here, a school district can exchange its property for the property of another entity that's interested in doing a potential exchange. Of course, just like any sale of property, the district would want to do its due diligence, make sure that the property it's exchanging into is, that it's explored, of course, all the title conditions around that property, the value. It does not have to be an even exchange in terms of value. The properties can be of an uneven value, and the difference can be made up with an additional payment, depending on what the difference is. And importantly, it does require a 2/3 vote to adopt a resolution that would allow for the exchange to occur. And just wanted to touch on that as, again, just an alternative to the surplus procedures. There's one more slide. Okay. Well, we do get the question a lot of course, after surplus procedure and the steps that we've talked throughout this presentation, what happens with lease and sale proceeds? So lease proceeds, just a straight lease, and along the lines of some of the procurement statutes that we've discussed, the board has the most flexibility to direct how those can be used. So that typically means that the lease revenue would become general fund revenue. And again, the district has flexibility with that revenue. Lease with option to purchase. The funds from a lease with an option to purchase, which we don't see very much, it's very rare, may be deposited into a restricted fund for routine repair of district facilities, and that's as defined by the State Allocation Board, and for up to a 5-year period. And then, of course, sale revenue, after a surplus property procedure is engaged in, shall be used for capital outlay or for costs of maintenance of school district property that the governing board of the school district determines will not recur within a 5-year period. So you can say that the sale revenue is probably the most restricted. And that is the end of the presentation. I'll open it up for more questions.
I just have a quick question. You'd mentioned that the board, in order to surplus property, you need a 2/3 vote. But isn't that the case with almost everything on here? Like whether we want to lease it or,
Can I touch on
Don't we
board
need a
policy?
2/3?
So your board policies require that, yes,
Okay,
for any lease that is beyond a 4-year period.
okay.
4 years and more. But not every procurement method we discussed here requires that as a final approval from the board.
Okay, but a lease definitely does in our situation.
In your district, yes.
Okay. So it's not like that in all districts?
No.
Interesting. All right. Yep. Thank you.
Any additional questions? None? Can you, Ms. Holguin, can you share some next steps with what happens after we pass the resolution and the bylaws?
Yes, absolutely. So after the resolution and the bylaws are passed, and we will be able to now move forward to form the 7-11 committee, we would move forward with the application process. And then we would bring forward the members, the applicants that are identified and vetted to make sure that they fit the 7 criteria that are required to be part of the 7-11 committee. We would bring that forward, and then the board would agree to those members being, and then we would set meeting dates to start having that process start to take place. So while today we shared some steps after the 7-11, because we wanted to share with the board just some options in terms of recommendations that may come forward to you as part of that 7-11, we wanted to give that to you so that we also share with you what some of the information that we'll be sharing with that committee. But with the board's approval tonight of the resolution as well as the bylaws, we will move forward with the process of the application.
Okay, so once we have the members, they'll probably get a presentation similar to this. They'll get trained.
Correct. The members would be, and we would bring those names to you before they are actually part of the committee. Correct.
Could the presentation be modified so that we can add additional examples and hypotheticals? So it's like if there's parents serving on this committee, they would be able to understand it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And even when we go through the process, we would definitely have more visuals and more of a breakdown. And that's tonight's presentation provided you a lot of information, more of a general overview. But as we go through the different steps, we want to break it down to smaller chunks. And we would obviously do that as well, too, with the 7-11 committee. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, so I'll move it.
Real quick, before you, if
Go
you might.
ahead.
One thing I would suggest to the board is really expanding what you're going to look at. Then that will provide you the opportunity for future use, regardless if you use it or not. For example, if you were to include here, whether or not you sell it, lease it, do whatever, but at least you have that on the table instead of going back and forth and back and forth. That's been my experience, that we've done this over the years, that we just provided a bunch of different properties to look at. It's not to scare individuals to say that, oh, we're going to close your school and we're going to close this one. It's just providing options to consider. And that's, I believe, posed in that manner. It's providing those options to consider for the public to have knowledge of what that means. You know, because if you spin your wheels, they're not that difficult. This makes it sound like it's earth-shattering, but it's actually a piece of cake. And you have the right people on there with the right knowledge, and you leading the charge, Ms. Holguin, you know, would be amazing to guide them through this process, because it's basically showing it to them. Do we need it? Do we not need it? Is the simple answer. And so I would recommend to this board is you're going to hamstring yourself if you just singular and then you come back and redo it again, and you come back and redo it again. You're going to be on this process trained forever, versus getting out front and proposing a variety of different properties just so they're there on the books. I mean, you're going to do what you do, but I'm just giving you that recommendation from past experiences, and it streamlines it a lot faster in the event you do want to sell at a much more rapid pace, or lease for that matter. It gives you that flexibility. You want the ultimate flexibility instead of going back and forth and back and forth.
And thank you, Mr. Ortega, for bringing that up, because in the bylaws, it does allow the board to have that flexibility. While the resolution looks at the portion of the Levita, our bylaws, the bylaws in front of you do allow that flexibility and the amendment to be made to the resolution. So thank you for pointing that out.
And that amendment can be made at any time, or, so tonight we adopt the resolution and it's only for Levita. We can then amend that prior to the 7-Eleven committee meeting? Is that what you're saying?
It could be done at any time. The recommendation would be to first go through that process there. But what I mean by that with the bylaws is that you can have those members also serve to look at other properties as well too that the district may be interested in.
Gotcha. Okay. So so this one specifically deals with Levita. We had previously talked about Taft I think it was Taft, the field in Taft as a secondary, and those were the only two we were looking at, right? Okay. I understand what Mr. Ortega is saying. I also, since we've never done it, we want to be a little cautious and make sure that we are doing things correctly and understanding exactly what we're doing. But I appreciate that experience. But I wouldn't be, I think we probably should go forward with Taft and Levita at some point.
I would even throw in here.
Go ahead. Okay. I just want to make it clear for the public, surplusing a property or school does not obligate us to sell anything, right?
Correct. Not at this time.
Yeah. I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
Right, because all of this was very overwhelming, but just to be clear, the surplus is the very first step to do any of these things. Unless we surplus, we can't do anything with it.
Right now, yes. It's the putting the committee together to make some recommendations. And again, that committee does not bind the board to do anything. It's an advisory committee that will bring back recommendations to the board.
It just gives us then options to go forward so that we can best get the best value from our assets.
Correct.
And is there expiration as to surplusing? Once you surplus a property, it's forever surplused, or can you pull it back, or what's that process?
It's not forever.
Okay.
Usually, as a best practice, the statutes don't have a specific time frame around it, but for best practice, we'd say no longer than 10 years after a surplus resolution has been approved. Do you want to rely on that?
So if we have properties that we surplused over 10 years ago, do you recommend us surplusing it again?
You may want to consider them again, yeah.
Okay.
Or at least remind the community what the background was at the time that they were reviewed and the surplus determination was made, just so that it's fresh and that the board and the community are receiving the information in real time and there's transparency around it.
Okay, so recommended 10 years.
Was it?
That's it. Oh, no,
Recommendation 10 years?
Yeah, she just said 10 years. No more than 10 years, yeah.
And there is a procedure for desurplusing, yes.
Okay.
Okay, any additional comments? No? Is there a motion? I'll move it. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Yamasaki. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 8A, information discussion items. Proposed revisions to board policies and bylaws, first reading. And Dr. Whitmer.
I'll take it.
Okay, thanks.
So the district's board policies and bylaws are reviewed and updated periodically as new state and federal laws and regulations are enacted. The proposed revisions for the following board policies are presented for first reading. And so there's no action to be taken. We're just presenting them for first reading, but if anybody has any comments, we're happy to take them.
Are there any comments right now?
I was wondering
ahead.
if you're going to do what you
Assign?
did last time and do some assignments.
We could assign, we'll split it up between 5 board members. So maybe in the Friday packet, we'll send that out again.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and split that up evenly between the board members, and the board members will review all the board policies, but they'll pay special attention to those that they're assigned.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, consent items. Consent items are acted upon by one motion. However, any such item can be considered separately at a board member's request and will be acted upon following approval of the consent items. Are there any items to be pulled? None? Okay. Is there a motion to approve all consent items?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Trustee Erickson. Is there a second? Thank you, Trustee Pelley. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. We move on to public comment.
We have 4 public comments. The first is Carlos Sanchez. Carlos Sanchez. Going once, going twice. Carlos Sanchez. Okay. Dr. Heather Chapman.
Before I speak, I'll take that. Boom. Good evening, President Page, trustees, cabinet, and community. It's with great frustration and concern that I share the following information with you regarding the 2-day power outage at El Medina High School. We found it unbelievable that after Southern California Edison sent notifications of a potential 2-day power outage to locations within the district, OUSD leadership did not create any plans for protecting safety and instructional time. When the power went off and then additional outages occurred due to wind damage, the district leadership took no action other than keeping students inside. No clear direction or communication was given for a potential second day of outages, and staff was left to scramble. We received 2 contradictory messages within minutes on day 2. Then the plan was, there is no plan. We are exceptionally concerned about functioning on a large campus with no power, no phones, no internet, no ventilation, and no public announcement system. Some classrooms have no windows, and keeping the door open was not an option for most of the first part of the outage. Staff received no communication about who had radios or what to do in another emergency. Staff was expected to use personal cell phones for communication with no ability to charge those devices. No emergency phone numbers were distributed. Staff had no access to student emergency cards, custody information, or schedules. From the moment the outage began, we expected that the district office would shift into emergency mode, as it does in other crises. But by the second day, we could not believe that we were still expected to complete our work on site. Employee associations reached out to the district leadership seeking solutions, such as taking the school day remote, whether synchronous or asynchronous. And we asked that we be communicating more clearly with staff and students' caregivers. This was rejected. Experienced faculty and staff also suggested some classified staff could work from home or at other district locations. Our students who chose to attend school or who needed power or internet access could have been directed to other school sites, multipurpose rooms, libraries, and district office spaces. All of those could have served as command centers. We implore district leadership to create and implement emergency plans for these types of events that will undoubtedly occur over and over again. These plans must include ideas for ongoing communication and access to vital information that is stored digitally. Staff and student safety was at risk. With the push to digital resources, many teachers found their options limited and instructional time was lost. To sum it up, these events are bigger than what site-based administration can be expected to navigate. I also would like to acknowledge the staff and students of Prospect and Esplanade Elementary Schools who were unnecessarily impacted. in solidarity with the classified and certificated workers of El Medina High School. Thank you.
I believe Carlos Sanchez walked in and then walked out. Okay, okay. Jolyn Lang. You're good, okay. Darshan Smaladen.
Good evening, board. I'm going to be very quick. President Page, Mr. Gonzalez. Couple of things. To piggyback on what Dr. Chapman said, I actually live in the area that is on the same grid as the high school. This has happened to my house 5 times. This will happen again. All of the other outages, I believe, happened when school was not in session. So Thanksgiving break, times like that. So I implore the district leadership to come up with a temporary, if not perfect, solution immediately so that we can, while you're developing a better plan or more long-term plans. This is not something that's going to be ending soon. And bad situation. The other request that I have is that if we could please notify those people who applied to the 7-Eleven committee already. There's a little bit of confusion amongst the general public about, oh, I already applied, I was accepted, and would be making the next round. So if we could reach out to those individuals, I would ask you do that. That's it. Thank you.
We'll give Carlos Sanchez one more chance if he's outside on the phone. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you for all the public comments. Mr. Gonzalez, can we get a report on what happened last week and like a list of communications that happened and the times that they were sent out?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. All right, so now on to 18A. Trustees.
Do we want to try to schedule our second December meeting, since we're going to have a second December meeting since we're here, and then the public will be aware of it? Would that be something we should do or not?
I mean, are we aware of when we're available in December?
That's what I'm asking. Should we try to see if if we're able to do that now?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to suggest some dates, if not, we can have Miss Eric reach out to us with a couple dates and narrow it down.
Okay.
I think it's probably easier since we're all here if everyone has their calendars.
We will have other board members, though, that will need to weigh in. Even though they're in the audience, they probably don't need to participate in that right now. So maybe we could do that.
We could put a couple days
with
in
them.
and see.
Or, yeah, we could propose a few days, but.
How about let's narrow it down to 2 days? You want to do it before or after the organizational meeting?
I think we should do it after.
Okay.
And I'm thinking maybe the 18th, the Wednesday, which is just a couple days after.
Okay, that's one option. Is there a second date?
That works for me.
And then that's also before school is out, so it won't be over winter break.
Or you do Thursday the 19th, gives them a couple of days in between our 16th and.
Okay, so the 18th or the 19th, we can have Miss Eric look into the boardroom to see if it's available and when we can all come in.
And I'm sort of not really available on the 19th, but I can change it if I have to. But
Okay.
it's my anniversary dinner, but I can change it if I need to. My husband will understand, I'm sure. Oh, okay. Well, you trump me then, whatever.
That's okay. And is it going to be a regular board meeting or will it be a study session?
It's a regular board meeting, right?
Regular board meeting? Okay. Yes?
I think it was suggested that we have another meeting because of the items that weren't discussed today. So we haven't developed the agenda for the 16th completely. We do have some requirements that we need to take care of with budget and, of course, the organizational portion of that. But we can look at the other items and maybe make some suggestions as to what should be on each to make sure that it's more balanced. But I would probably say, to be on the safe side, we might want to consider that we could take some action on the 18th or 19th if we need to.
Okay.
If there's minimum amount of items, we could do both.
My understanding was there could be some facilities issues that would take longer to discuss, potentially. Okay.
Do you need us to meet the week earlier?
I think those dates will work for staff.
Okay.
The 18th and 19th will work for staff. Okay, then we'll schedule it as a regular board meeting just so that we have flexibility based on everything that we have on there, including swearing in 5 board members. Okay? All right. So trustees Rumsey and Ortega, can you please join me over at the podium? And Trustee Yamasaki, did you want to say some words now while we transition over?
Oh, I just wanted to thank them both for their service and to OUSD and to the kids, and that I wish them both well and in whatever endeavors they do in the future. And yeah, thank you.
Well, I guess if we're just talking and waiting, Ms. Rumsey, it was a pleasure getting to know you over the last 4 years. Thank you very much for always being very cordial and polite and participating, and it's been very nice. And Mr. Ortega, we appreciate your 22 plus years of service, so thank you.
So before the district gives some recognition, we do have others who could not make it tonight. So we have Superintendent Dr. Bean, who intended to join us to personally thank you, but was unable to attend due to the agenda change. So he will be sending some certificates. And then additionally, we have Villa Park Councilwoman Ms. Crystal Miles had planned to also present some certificates on behalf of this Villa Park City Council to both trustees Ortega and Rumsey. Instead, we are presenting certificates on behalf of Villa Park Mayor Mr. Rossini and Councilwoman Ms. Miles, expressing the city's gratitude for their commitment and service. So I think these are here. And then we also have certificates from Assemblymember Evelina Valencia in recognition of our trustees' dedication. And he thanks Ms. Rumsey and Mr. Ortega for all that they have done for our schools and community. Okay. Okay, so on behalf of the Board of Education and our Orange Unified School District, we also want to thank you for your dedicated service to our district. Trustee Rumsey, we began our journey on the board together, and it's been a pleasure working alongside you. And I've especially enjoyed partnering with you to mentor our student board members, and your guidance has been a lasting impact on them, and it's been wonderful to witness. I appreciate your perspective on the board as an educator, and your thoughtfulness and the heart that you put into supporting our school community is deeply appreciated. And so we do have one small gift for you. And then Trustee Ortega, who has been, who has made a lasting impact as the longest consecutively serving member of the Orange Unified School District's Board of Education. Your years of service have shown your commitment to our schools and community, and the legacy of your work will influence OUSD for years to come. Thank you, John, for your dedicated service to our students and families of OUSD, and we also have something for you. All right, congratulations. Okay. I need to go get my computer, so you go first. How do you want them?
Oh, yeah, we need.
I'll put these in the. Sure you want to go? This mic's
First, I would like to extend my gratitude to Orange Unified District, the staff, and my fellow trustees. Thank you for accepting me into this world, guiding me through the process of being a trustee, and helping me to continue to learn, continue my learning as an educator. Secondly, I would like to thank the Orange Unified School community. As a private school teacher, I appreciated the ability to see great teachers in action. I consider myself a lifelong learner and took advantage of an opportunity to learn from the great educators in this district. Clearly, OUSD's programs exhibit the 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. I would like to thank John Ortega. John has served the city and this district and this board for 20 years. One time we talked about how my grandfather was grew orange trees here in Orange and harvested oranges, and his grandfather did the same. And so it's kind of neat to think that they may have been side by side harvesting oranges here. Trustee Ortega has demonstrated a commitment to this district to better our schools, and has worked as an advocate for our students and their families. This time on the board has shown me the amazing programs and opportunities offered at every single school in this district. My prayers will continue to be with this board, the decisions they make, and the students and families they serve. Thank you.
Good evening, and people have asked, well, how do you feel? What's it like? It's a very joyous occasion, is what it is. Miss Erickson asked me tonight, how do you feel? What's going on? I said, it's no different. I've dedicated my time to this district, to the students and the staff for a little over 23 years. When I first joined the board, I'd ask, what is the board? What do you do? It was a rather interesting time at that juncture. And so I look at it as I put my heart and soul into it. My background, having served in law enforcement, started my journey many years ago in law enforcement to serve and help others and help those that couldn't help themselves. To be there in need, be there to support them in their needs or their circumstances. It taught me a lot to work with a variety of different individuals. And it didn't matter the circumstances, who they were, what they looked like. My parents always taught me how to respect everybody, regardless of who you are. You treat the same person as you would if you're the custodian or the CEO. It doesn't matter. You respect them equally. And so I would like to just give some comments that I'm not going to go into a long laundry list of things that we did here in this district. A lot of you do know that my faith is very serious to me, and that's where I hold my grounding and why I do what I do for that reason. Took a little notes and I said, I began this journey 23 years ago, and I want to express my deepest gratitude to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as well as to my beautiful wife. Unfortunately, my family was not able to be here this evening due to some personal commitments that I can't speak of. My amazing children, very blessed to have great children, great heads on their shoulders, and they have all come through our system just like I have as well. And especially to my supportive parents, who my father is a graduate of Orange High School, granted many, many years ago. But they have taught me an immense amount of everything of who I am today. Their love and encouragement have been my foundation throughout this journey. I am grateful to many individuals who have impacted my path over the years, especially those from whom I've had the privilege to learn. My heartfelt thanks also goes to the voters, the parents, the staff, and students for their confidence and trust in me all these years. I've had the opportunity to work alongside many superintendents, assistant superintendents, staff members. The list is very long. I've learned from all of them, and that's how it made me become the board member that I am, is to ask questions. Because as policymakers, that's our job, is to make policy, but make good policy. So you have to ask, what and how do I become effective in what I'm doing in this job? I was reminiscing about first coming on with Robert French. Some of you in the audience may have remembered him. And we actually became really close. He loved his cookies. He's a funny guy. And we'd all make friendly wagers in the sense when it came to football season, because he was a huge USC fan. Huge. So we'd make friendly wagers, so basically whoever lost had to wear the other team's gear. We decorated the dais in the other team. There were times where, believe it or not, I had to wear USC gear. And it was fun times. And that's what made it so fun and interesting to serve on the board. And I learned a lot. You know, we had Tom Godley, we had Renee Dreyer, Michael Christensen, Gunmarie Hansen, Mr. Gonzalez. They're all great in their own unique ways and what they can attribute to this district and provide the leadership and guidance that's necessary. When I first arrived here on scene, here we go, talking cop talk. In our time together, we at the board navigated through, if you can imagine, multiple schedules. We had a multi-track, single track, and traditional track. So can you imagine managing all of those tracks? It was a nightmare, but we got through it. And then I was told about how some schools were looked at and how they were treated and things in that, so we did a lot of curing immediately on that. And as an example, when the Williams settlement presented itself, we acted decisively and sought funding aggressively and allocated district savings to bring comprehensive updates to many of the schools, of which I've spoken about 7 of them. I will say Mr. Christensen, during his tenure as Director of Facilities and Maintenance, he was aggressive in acquiring that funding, plus some of the savings that we had saved as well along the way to make that project happen for those 7 schools. So we were pretty proactive in what we were trying to accomplish. The other education incentives are the Early College Academy, which, if we go back even many years ago, and I share the story where we did the Middle College Academy, Middle College School, and this didn't happen at that time. But now that we have the ECA, it is skyrocketing, as well as all the other programs, the pathways that we have. The pathways are exciting for a lot of our students, and they're all in myriad different subjects. So these pathways empower them to enter workforce, pursue further education with confidence. Again, I don't want to prolong it, but it's just there's so much, and I want to share with the board, the new board members, your responsibility is going to be great. And listen to both sides, because you may be able to glean, and believe it or not, I've gleaned from those who constantly love speaking about me. But as long as you can learn from that, garner some good ideas, things of that nature, some things that you may not think you're in favor of that you are in favor of. So I come in it with an open mind. As I always say, don't do good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. So it's more important to do things in secret than public, is what that is. And we're entrusting you to continue with the fiscal responsibility that we have. Our financial reserves and everything associated with it. There's other things that I would like to speak of, but not at this juncture. And I just implore you to continue to look at our deferred maintenance, making sure it's online at 4%, which is equating to about $16 million a year, to make sure that's in the budget. So again, I just want to say thank you again for enduring support and partnership. It has been my honor to serve this community. And as I said, I could be here all night thanking many, many, many individuals that I've worked with who are just awesome men and women who truly care for this district, care for the students, and truly want to be effective in what they do. And so I leave you with that, and well, I will say, as Ms. Rumsey stated, you know, I will continue to pray for you and this board, and may God bless you.
Thank you both for everything in your words. We do have some refreshments, so please stay to have a piece of cake and congratulate Trustees Ortega and Rumsey. And now we will adjourn the meeting.
President Page, before you
sorry.
adjourn that, I just wanted to make a clarification on the additional meeting that we're adding. Although we don't have an official date yet, because it wasn't agendized to add that as a regular meeting, whether or not we do a study session or we have an agenda with action items and information, it is considered a special meeting.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
President Page, I do have some comments to make very briefly. First and foremost, my apologies. I'm under the weather a little bit, so if my voice is a little bit raspy, it is because of that. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Mr. Ortega for his 18 years of service and dedication to the betterment of education here in the Orange Unified School District. As a graduate of Villa Park High School, there's some commonality in between us, and seriously, Mr. Ortega, you've been a role model to me on this board, and I'm sure you have been a role model to many other trustees and student board members as well. Vice President Rumsey, I'd like to thank you for your service to this district as well as Vice President. Working with her with the Student Bill of Rights, I know for a fact your dedication as a board trustee and as an educator, your intentions for your students are well-intentioned and good. I'd just also like to speak on some of the tragedies that happened this morning. You know, it happened at around 11 o'clock a.m., I believe, and, you know, the school went on shutdown. And it was definitely unnerving for myself and for many students at the high school. You know, coming out of the class and seeing cop cars and yellow tape throughout the quad. I'd like to offer my sincerest condolences to the friends and the families of the individual who unfortunately passed away this morning. But I do believe that as Spartans, we are strong, we are resilient, and we are able to prevail from the tragedy that occurred this morning. I'd also like to thank Superintendent Gonzalez for his service as Superintendent of the Orange Unified School District, as the first official Hispanic Superintendent of Orange Unified. You have set an example of strong and exemplary leadership for other superintendents in the future. Thank you so much, and I'm very glad that you'll stick with us in the future as Deputy Superintendent. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening, you all.
Now we'll adjourn at 8:43.